Captain Lee Hune stared at the strange readings on his ship's screen. The exploration vessel Rising Dawn had been traveling through empty space for 3 weeks, searching for new worlds that humans could settle on. His crew was getting tired and homesick, but something about this system felt different. "Captain, I'm picking up a huge metal structure ahead," said Park Mina, his navigator. She was a young woman from Seoul who had joined the space fleet only 2 years ago. "It's not moving, but it's definitely not natural." Hune leaned forward in his command chair. After 15 years of exploring space, he had learned to trust his instincts. This felt important. "Show me." The main screen flickered to life, revealing something that made the entire bridge crew gasp. A massive space station floated in the darkness, but it looked nothing like human or any other alien technology they knew. The structure was curved and organic, like it had been grown rather than built. Strange lights pulsed along its surface in a rhythm that seemed almost like a heartbeat. "Sir, I'm reading life signs," reported Dr. Song Ji-woo from her medical station. "But they are very weak. Whatever's in there is dying." Engineering Officer Kim Tai-ho ran his scanners over the station. "The design is incredible, Captain. The materials they used, the way it's constructed, this is far beyond anything we've seen before. But the power systems are failing." Hune made his decision quickly. "Prepare a boarding party. We're going over there." The airlock connected with a soft hiss. Hune led his team through corridors that seemed to breathe around them. The walls were smooth and curved, made of some kind of living metal that grew dimmer with each step they took. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows that danced like ghosts. "The atmosphere is breathable," reported Lieutenant Lim So-young, checking her instruments. "But there's something wrong with the air recycling system. It's breaking down." They found them in what appeared to be the central chamber. Tall, graceful beings sat or lay on the floor, their bodies covered in what looked like living crystal. The crystals were beautiful but dim, like diamonds that had lost their fire. Some of the beings were completely still, their crystal skin dark and lifeless. The largest of the surviving creatures looked up as the humans entered. When it spoke, its voice came through a small translation device that hung around its neck. The sound was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Strangers," it said. "You should not have come here. This place is death now." Dr. Song immediately began scanning the creature with her medical equipment. "I'm a doctor," she said gently. "Let me help you." The being's crystal eyes focused on her with what might have been hope. "I am Keeper Threenel of the Velnathi people. We were once builders of great things. We made the orbital cities that circle distant suns. We built the quantum bridges that let ships travel instantly between stars. The galaxy used our knowledge and called us friends." "What happened to you?" Hune asked, kneeling beside the dying alien. Threenel's crystal skin flickered weakly. "Our home world fell to something we call the consuming dark. A force that eats light itself, that turns matter into nothingness. We escaped with what few we could save, but we had nowhere to go. The other species in the galaxy." The alien paused, and when it continued, there was deep sadness in its voice. "They said we were no longer useful. Our world was gone, our cities destroyed. We could not pay for help, so they abandoned us here to die." Kim Tai-ho was examining the station's failing systems. "Captain, their life support is based on processing specific minerals that their bodies need to survive. Without those compounds, they literally starve to death. The machines that make these minerals are breaking down." Dr. Song looked up from her scans, her face grim. "There are about 3,000 of them still alive, but barely. They need help immediately, or they'll all be dead within days." A small Velnathi child crawled over to Captain Hune and touched his hand with fingers that looked like living gems. The child was so weak it could barely move, but it looked up at the human with eyes full of trust. The universal translator couldn't capture what the child whispered, but Hune didn't need words to understand. "How long have you been here?" he asked Threenel. "2 of your years. We sent messages to every government, every species we had helped before. They all said the same thing: resources must be allocated efficiently. The Velnathi are no longer a viable investment." The keeper's voice grew bitter. "We who built the wonders they still use every day became inconvenient." Lieutenant Lim checked her readings again. "Captain, even if we took every person on our ship and put them in the escape pods, we could only save maybe 50 of them. Our life support systems aren't designed for their biology." Hune stood up slowly, his mind racing. 3,000 people dying because they were no longer profitable to save. Children like the one who had touched his hand, fading away because adults in distant offices had decided their lives weren't worth the cost. "Send a message to Earth Command," he said quietly. Tell them we found survivors who need immediate help. Sir, they'll say the same thing the others did, Lim warned. Hune looked around at the dying Velnathi, at their beautiful crystal forms growing darker by the hour. He thought about the child's trust, about the keeper's dignity even in the face of abandonment. No, he said firmly. They won't. Because we're human. Admiral Choy Des stood in front of the packed assembly hall on Earth. Representatives from every human colony and space station had gathered for an emergency meeting. The holographic image of the dying Velnathi station floated above the central table, its fading lights telling a story that made many people uncomfortable. 3,000 people are dying, Desang said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. They built the technology that half our galaxy runs on. Now they're starving to death because nobody thinks they're worth saving. Representative Han Sujin from the Mars colony stood up. Admiral, with respect, the cost estimates are enormous. The special minerals they need, the modified life support systems, the transport ships. We could feed 5 human colonies for a year with those resources. Then we go hungry, Desang replied simply. Some things matter more than full stomachs. The debate that followed was loud and heated. Some representatives argued that humans had their own problems to solve. Others pointed out that the galaxy had already decided the Velnathi were beyond help. Why should humanity be different? Old Representative Kim Minute-ho from the asteroid mining station slowly stood up. His weathered face had seen decades of hard work in space. My grandfather used to tell me stories about the old wars on Earth. He said the measure of a people isn't what they do when it's easy. It's what they do when it's hard and nobody's watching. Meanwhile, back at the Velnathi station, Dr. Song Ji-woo worked day and night trying to understand how to keep the aliens alive. She had converted the Rising Dawn's medical bay into a research lab, with Professor Nam Ki-woo helping her study Velnathi biology through video calls from Earth. Their bodies work completely differently from ours, she explained to Captain Hune over a cup of cold coffee. They don't eat food like we do. Instead, they absorb energy from special mineral compounds that their bodies convert into life force. Without these minerals, they literally fade away. Engineering Officer Kim Tai-ho was having his own struggles. He had managed to connect human power systems to some of the Velnathi equipment, but it was like trying to run a computer with water instead of electricity. I can keep maybe 50 of them alive with what we have, he told the captain. But 3,000? That's impossible with our current technology. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place. Young technician Yoon De-young was working late in the station's lower levels when she noticed something strange. The Velnathi children who played near the human crew seemed brighter than the others. Their crystal skin glowed stronger when humans were around. Captain, she called excitedly over the communication system. I think I've found something important. Come down to level 7. When Hune arrived, he found a group of Velnathi children sitting in a circle around De-young. Their crystal bodies were glowing brighter than any others on the station. One small child was actually laughing, a sound like tiny silver bells. Watch this, De-young said. She moved away from the children, and slowly their glow began to dim. When she came back, they brightened again. It's not just the minerals they need. It's emotional energy. Hope, friendship, love, somehow we're feeding that to them just by being here. Dr. Song ran every test she could think of. The results were incredible. Human emotional resonance is actually stabilizing their biocrystals, she reported. They're not just dying from mineral starvation. They're dying from despair. Back on Earth, the vote was close, but humanity made its choice. The Assembly approved Operation Sanctuary by just 12 votes. Admiral Desang immediately began mobilizing resources from across human space. The response was incredible. On Luna, factory workers volunteered for double shifts to produce the special equipment needed. The mining stations in the asteroid belt began processing rare minerals they had been saving for emergencies. Children on the orbital habitat started donation drives, giving up their entertainment credits and toy allowances. Captain Park Jin-woo commanded the transport fleet that would carry the Velnathi to safety. His cargo ships had been quickly modified with temporary life support systems. It won't be comfortable, he admitted, but it'll keep them alive during the journey to New Hope Colony. The most surprising help came from retired spacers and civilian volunteers. Old Captain Ko Byung-ho brought his ancient freighter out of mothballs. Been flying these routes for 40 years, he said. Not about to stop now when people need help. But not everyone in the galaxy was happy with humanity's decision. The Zephyrian Trade Consortium sent an official message demanding that humans stay away from the station. Abandoned assets become property of the finder, their message stated. The Velnathi technology is now legally available for salvage. The Galactic Council's response was even colder. Ambassador Zelvar transmitted a formal complaint: humans demonstrate dangerous inefficiency. Resources allocated to evolutionary dead ends destabilize galactic economic balance. Captain Hune read these messages while watching Velnathi children play with human crew members. The alien children were teaching the humans a singing game that made their crystal bodies flash in beautiful patterns. Let them complain, he said to his communications officer. We've got work to do. Dr. Song made one final discovery that changed everything. Hidden in the Velnathi genetic memory was information about quantum engineering that could revolutionize space travel. But she kept this knowledge secret, knowing that if other species learned about it, they would suddenly find the Velnathi very valuable again. The evacuation began 3 days later, with human ships arriving from 12 different star systems. As the first Velnathi children boarded the transport vessels, their crystal bodies glowing brighter than they had in months, Keeper Threenel spoke quietly to Captain Hune. Why do your people sacrifice so much for strangers? Hune watched human and Velnathi crew members working together to carry the weakest aliens to safety. Because that's what makes us human. The mineral synthesis plants on Mars worked without stopping for 3 straight weeks. Director O Minitsuk hadn't slept properly in days, surviving on coffee and determination. The massive industrial complexes burned so bright they could be seen from space, processing raw materials into the complex compounds that kept Velnathi alive. We're using up all our emergency reserves, Chief Engineer BAE Solgi reported, her voice tired but steady. The outer colonies are already experiencing power shortages. If we keep this up, people will be sitting in the dark. Minitsuk looked at the production numbers on his screen. They needed to make 10 times more of the special minerals, but they were already pushing every machine beyond its limits. Then we sit in the dark, he said quietly. These people are dying right now. On Europa Station, families gathered around their dinner tables under dimmed lights. The power rationing had reached even the inner colonies. But instead of complaining, parents explained to their children why the lights were low. Remember the crystal people Captain Hune found? 8-year-old Lee Subin asked her mother. Yes, sweetheart. Are we helping them by eating in the dark? We are. Subin smiled and finished her dinner without another complaint about the dim lighting. Commander Park Jin-woo coordinated the massive refugee fleet from Lunar Station. His transport ships had been designed to carry cargo, not people, but human engineers worked miracles in just days. They installed temporary life support systems, sleeping areas, and even small recreational spaces where Velnathi children could play safely. It's not comfortable, Jin-woo admitted to his fleet captains. But it'll keep them alive for the 2-week journey to the New Hope system. The real problem started when the Zephyrian Trade Consortium arrived. Their sleek warships dropped out of hyperspace around the dying station like metal predators surrounding wounded prey. Consortium Admiral Vextar, a reptilian creature with cold yellow eyes, sent his demands immediately. The Velnathi abandoned this station when they could no longer maintain it. Under galactic salvage law, their technology now belongs to whoever claims it first. We claim it. Captain Hune's small escort fleet looked tiny compared to the consortium warships. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Lim So-young, ran the numbers and shook her head grimly. Sir, they have 15 ships to our 4. Their weapons are newer, their shields are stronger. We can't win a direct fight. Maybe we don't need to win, Hune replied, studying the tactical display. Maybe we just need to not lose long enough. The standoff began immediately. Consortium ships positioned themselves between the human rescue fleet and the station. No shots were fired, but everyone knew the situation could explode into violence at any moment. Dr. Song Ji-woo made a disturbing discovery while examining Velnathi technology more closely. Captain, this isn't just about saving refugees. The Velnathi have genetic memory patterns that contain engineering secrets from across the galaxy. If the consortium gets access to that knowledge. She didn't need to finish. Everyone understood. The consortium would use Velnathi knowledge to build better weapons, faster ships, and more powerful industrial systems. They would sell this technology to the highest bidders and become the most powerful force in the galaxy. The irony is perfect, Keeper Threenel said sadly when Hune explained the situation. The galaxy abandoned us when we were weak. Now they fight over our corpses when they realize we still have value. The young Velnathi who had touched Hune's hand weeks ago now stayed close to the human crew. Her name, as close as humans could pronounce it, was Shimmering Hope. She had learned basic English and helped translate for the other children. "Captain Hune," she said with her musical voice, "why do the metal ships want to hurt us? How do you explain greed to a child whose people had freely shared their knowledge with the galaxy for centuries?" "They want something you have," Hune said simply. "And they don't understand that taking it by force makes it worthless." The crisis deepened when 3 more consortium ships arrived, carrying boarding equipment and military robots. Admiral Vextar's next message was direct: "You have 6 hours to abandon the station and return to human space. After that, we will take what belongs to us by right of salvage." But humanity's response surprised everyone, including the humans themselves. Ships began jumping into the system from across human space, not military vessels, but civilian craft. Old freighters, mining ships, passenger transports, even small family shuttles. They came because they had heard about the crystal people who needed help. Retired Captain Ko Byung-ho brought his ancient cargo hauler Lucky Strike. "Fought in the border wars 30 years ago," he told anyone who would listen. "Not about to let some profit-hungry lizards hurt kids while I'm still breathing." The Velnathi children watched through the station's observation windows as more and more human ships arrived. Their crystal bodies glowed brighter with each new arrival. Hope was literally keeping them alive. "I don't understand humans," Admiral Vextar transmitted to his fleet. "They gain nothing from this. The refugees cannot pay them. There are no trade agreements, no political advantages. Why do they sacrifice their resources?" His second-in-command, a cold creature called Sektar, studied the human fleet through their senses. "Perhaps they are simply defective, Admiral. Their behavior does not follow any logical pattern." On the rising dawn, Captain Hune received reports from across the human fleet. Volunteer crews were sharing food with Velnathi refugees. Human children were teaching alien children Earth songs. Engineers from different ships worked together to improve the life support systems. "Captain," Communications Officer Jang Haijin reported, "we're receiving a message from the Galactic Council. They're ordering all ships to withdraw and let the consortium handle the situation." Hune looked at the tactical display. 15 consortium warships against nearly 100 human vessels, but most of the human ships were civilian craft with no weapons at all. "Send a reply to the council," he said. "Tell them we're busy." The battle was coming, and everyone knew it. The standoff lasted for 3 long days. Captain Lee Hune's small military escort floated in space between the consortium warships and the refugee transports. Behind them, nearly 200 human ships of all sizes formed a protective wall around the dying Velnathi station. Admiral Vextar grew more impatient with each passing hour. His reptilian crew whispered among themselves about the strange behavior of these humans. Why would they risk death for aliens they had just met? "This is your final warning," Vextar transmitted to the human fleet. "Move aside or we will remove you by force." Captain Hune stood on his bridge, looking at the faces of his crew. They were scared, anyone would be facing such overwhelming odds, but none of them suggested retreat. Lieutenant Lim So-young checked her weapon systems one more time, even though she knew their small guns would barely scratch the consortium ships. "Sir," Communications Officer Jang Haijin called out excitedly, "we're getting new contacts jumping in from hyperspace." The main screen filled with light as dozens of new ships appeared. But these weren't more consortium vessels. They were human ships from the furthest colonies, places so remote that messages took weeks to reach them. Somehow, word had spread across human space, and people were coming to help. Old Captain Ko Byung-ho's voice crackled over the communication system from his ancient freighter. "Sorry we're late, Captain Hune. Had to pick up a few friends along the way." Behind his cargo ship came mining vessels from the asteroid belt, exploration ships from the frontier colonies, even a few luxury passenger liners whose wealthy owners had volunteered for refugee duty. The human fleet grew from 200 ships to over 400 in just hours. Aboard the Velnathi station, the crystal people watched in amazement as more humans arrived. Their bodies glowed brighter with each new ship that appeared. The children pressed their faces against the observation windows, their excitement making them shine like living jewels. "I have never seen anything like this," Keeper Threenel said to Dr. Song Ji-woo, who was still working to keep the weakest Velnathi alive. "Your people come from across the galaxy to help strangers. Why?" Dr. Song looked up from her medical equipment, tired but determined. "Because it's right. Sometimes that's reason enough." The battle began at dawn, ship time. Admiral Vextar finally lost patience and ordered his warships to attack. The consortium vessels were faster, stronger, and better armed than anything in the human fleet. Their weapons could punch through human shields like they were made of paper. But the humans fought like no one had ever seen before. When consortium ships targeted the refugee transports, human vessels threw themselves in the way. Captain Park Jin-woo's transport ship Safe Harbor took a direct hit meant for a ship full of Velnathi children. His last transmission was simple: "Tell my family I did something that mattered." Commander Ryu In-ho piloted his small destroyer Steadfast straight at the largest consortium cruiser. His ship was already badly damaged, its hull cracked and bleeding atmosphere into space. "This is for every child who dies while adults count money," he transmitted as his ship rammed into the enemy vessel at full speed. The explosion lit up space like a small star. Both ships were destroyed, but the consortium cruiser took 2 others with it when its reactor exploded. The human crew of the Steadfast became heroes in an instant, their sacrifice inspiring the entire fleet. But the tide of battle was turning against the humans. Their brave hearts couldn't overcome the simple facts of firepower and technology. Ship after ship fell to consortium weapons. The refugee transports, protected by layers of civilian vessels, were slowly being exposed to enemy fire. That's when something impossible happened. Keeper Threenel, watching human ships die to protect his people, made a decision that would change both species forever. Deep in Velnathi genetic memory lay secrets that had been hidden for thousands of years, technology so advanced that even the Galactic Council didn't know it existed. The ancient quantum resonance system suddenly activated across the human fleet. Reality itself seemed to bend around the ships as they phased partially out of normal spacetime. Consortium weapons fired through human vessels like they were shooting at ghosts. Admiral Vextar stared in shock as his most powerful weapons passed harmlessly through a human cargo ship. "What is happening?" he demanded of his science officer. "Unknown technology, Admiral. The humans appear to be existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously." But it wasn't human technology. It was the Velnathi sharing their deepest secrets with the people who had risked everything to save them. "It is not payment," Keeper Threenel transmitted directly to Captain Hune's mind through the quantum link. "Friends do not pay friends for kindness. This is a gift freely given." The battle ended as quickly as it had begun. Consortium ships found themselves unable to target the human fleet, their weapons useless against enemies who could step between dimensions. Some of the more cowardly consortium captains began retreating immediately. Admiral Vextar made one last attempt to salvage the situation. "The Galactic Council will hear of this. Humans are using illegal technology." Captain Hune's reply was broadcast to every ship in the system: "Tell the Council that when they abandoned these people to die, they lost any right to judge who helps them." The consortium fleet jumped to hyperspace in defeat, leaving the humans alone with their rescued friends. The evacuation continued without further interference, and for the first time in months, every Velnathi child on the station was glowing brightly with hope. The galaxy had learned something new about humans that day. When they made a stand, they didn't count the cost. They just stood. 5 years had passed since the rescue at the dying station. Admiral Hune walked through the crystal gardens of New Velna, the settlement that had grown on the world humans called Haven's Rest. The morning sun caught the tall spires of living crystal that rose beside human homes, creating rainbows that danced across the ground. Children ran past him, laughing as they played a game that mixed human tag with Velnathi light dancing. The human children glowed faintly when they touched their Velnathi friends, while the crystal children sparkled like stars. It was impossible to tell who was winning, and nobody seemed to care. "Uncle Hune," called a familiar voice. The young Velnathi girl who had once been called Shimmering Hope ran up to him. She had chosen the human name Crystal Song and spoke perfect English now. Her crystal skin blazed with health and happiness. "How are your studies going?" Hune asked, kneeling down to her level. "Amazing. Dr. Song is teaching me about human medicine, and I'm teaching her about crystal healing. We're learning how to help both kinds of people when they get sick." Dr. Song Ji-woo approached from the medical complex, a building that looked like it had been grown from both metal and living gem. She was now the director of xenobiology for the entire colony, but she still made time to teach the children. "The Velnathi quantum biological synthesis has changed everything," she told Hune excitedly. "Diseases that we fought for hundreds of years are now curable in days. Their knowledge, combined with human medical techniques, is saving lives across the galaxy." They walked together toward the engineering district, where the real miracles were happening. Kim Tae-ho, now chief engineer of New Velna, worked alongside Velnathi architects to design ships that existed partially outside normal spacetime. The vessels looked like works of art, their hulls shifting between solid metal and crystalline energy patterns. "Watch this," Tae-ho said proudly, showing them a small test ship. He pressed a control, and the vessel simply vanished. It's not invisible, it stepped sideways into quantum space. A trip that used to take months now takes hours. In the central plaza, Hune and Velnathi families gathered for the daily community meeting. Keeper Threenel, now calling himself Elder Thomas in the human fashion, stood before the mixed crowd. His crystal body blazed with an inner light that came from pure contentment. Today we welcome 3 more ships of refugees, he announced. The Kethmori people from the Spiral Arm have lost their homeworld to stellar collapse. The Galactic Council has declared them economically non-viable. The crowd murmured angrily. They had heard this story before. But we know better, Elder Thomas continued, his voice ringing with conviction. We know that every life has value, that every people has gifts to share. We will make room. Old Captain Ko Byung-ho, now retired but still living on the colony, raised his weathered hand. My cargo bay's empty and my engines still run. When do we leave? Admiral Choy Des arrived that afternoon on the diplomatic transport Harmony. He was now Secretary General of the Terran Commonwealth, but he had insisted on personally meeting with each refugee species they rescued. The other civilizations are studying us, he told Hune as they walked through the hybrid city. They call it the human doctrine, the idea that a society's strength comes from protecting those who can't protect themselves. Are they copying us? Hune asked. Desang smiled. Some are trying. The Centauri Republic just established their first refugee assistance program. The Vegan Trade Union is debating similar measures. It's slow, but change is happening. Intelligence Director Yoon De-young joined them at the observation deck that overlooked the spaceport. She had grown from a young technician into one of the colony's most important leaders, coordinating rescue operations across the galaxy. We found 4 more species in the past year, she reported. The singing crystals of Procene, the cloud dancers from the Veil Nebula, the deep swimmers from the water world Oceania, and now the Kethmori. Every time, other civilizations watch to see what we'll do. And every time, we surprise them, Hune said, watching a mixed crew of humans and Velnathi prepare a rescue ship for launch. The most remarkable change wasn't in technology or politics, but in the children. Hune and Velnathi young people grew up together, learning each other's languages, sharing each other's games, and developing friendships that transcended species. They spoke of their mixed community as simply home. 10-year-old Park Minute-jun played quantum chess with his best friend, a Velnathi boy named Bright Ekko. The game pieces existed in several dimensions at once, and only children seemed able to master its impossible rules. When I grow up, I want to be a rescue captain like Admiral Hune, Minute-jun declared, moving a piece that existed in 3 places simultaneously. Me too, agreed Bright Ekko, his crystal form sparkling with excitement. We'll find all the lost people and bring them home. As the twin suns set over Haven's Rest, casting long shadows from the crystal spires, Admiral Hune stood with Elder Thomas on the highest observation platform. The city below glowed with warm light, human technology and Velnathi energy working together to create something neither species could have built alone. You saved us, Thomas said quietly, his crystal voice filled with gratitude. Hune watched a human child teaching a group of Velnathi youngsters how to throw a baseball while they taught her how to make her hands glow with stored starlight. No, he replied, feeling the truth of his words. We saved each other. In the distance, another rescue ship prepared for launch. Somewhere in the galaxy, another economically non-viable species waited for help that would never come from the established powers. But it would come from the humans and their crystal friends, because they had learned that the universe might cast people aside, but that didn't mean anyone had to let them fall.